Today on the Topping Show, Matt Walsh on South African refugees. Statement goes viral on social media. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett grills Trump administration. Representative Shri Thanedar wants people to stop mocking him online. Dick's to buy Footlocker for over $2 billion. Cadillac says they will not make another car based on the Chevrolet Corvette. And Polaris, well, they recall yet more of their recreational off-road vehicles. All of that and much more on the Topping Show. Thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in today. Today's episode of the Topping Show is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in IT security. Heck, I see their founder at least twice a day. Gotta say he's quite handsome and brilliant. He's me, see that's the joke. If you're an IT leader or business owner, you can reach out to the team at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, still giving away a free flamethrower with every IT purchase with Picatinny rail adapter, so you mount it to any standard AR-15, like all awesome accessories can be. Go to toppingtechnologies.com and click the flamethrower button to learn more and see me shooting a flamethrower. And lastly, trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you can click that button and tell your friends, I would greatly appreciate it. Now going over to the business part of the podcast, you have Dick's Sporting Goods to buy a Footlocker for $2.4 billion, which is quite a pretty penny to say the least. Now this is brought to us thanks to Savatia over at Reuters. There you can see one of the cliche sporting goods section of the Dick's store. In this case, all the overpriced clothing from Vietnam, though I'm sure it's probably moderately comfortable. Now they say, quote, Dick's Sporting Goods has agreed to acquire smaller rival Footlocker for $2.4 billion. The second major footwear deal this month after the buyout of Skechers as retailers navigate choppy demand and global trade uncertainties. The $24 per share offer announced by both companies represents a, geez Louise, this is comical. It represents an 86% premium to Footlocker's last close and gives Dick's a stronger foothold. Not sure if that was a pun intended, but it should have been. In the sneaker industry with over 3,200 stores and an entry into international markets. The combined company could also benefit from better negotiating power with key vendors such as Nike and Adidas and Puma. At the time when the Trump administration steep tariffs threatened to raise supply chain costs for U.S. retailers and discourage consumer spending. You have Joel Broccoli, partner global consultant at West Monroe, saying, quote, tariffs have been forcing companies' hand to some extent, but this is also a strategic moment to acquire additional scale and strengthen buying power in the footwear market, unquote. They say that Footlocker shares surged 85% to $23.81 probably per share after the news. After having lost 40% of their value year so far, Dick's Sporting Goods fell by 14%. TD Cowen analyst J.D. Curran said the deal would be a, quote, strategic mistake for Dick's as the company will have an increased investments to further scale the fixed Footlocker. Over the past few years, Footlocker has lost market share to competition as brands such as Nike expand to their direct-to-consumer business. Pulling customer visits in malls where most of the stores are located have also weighed on sales. Yeah. Footlocker has tried to have a turnaround plan for a couple of years. Doesn't seem to be doing great. Now, they also say that Nike has also reversed course under the new CEO, Elliot Hill, leaning back into their relationships with retailers and moving away from D2C or direct-to-consumer. Dick's expects to operate Footlockers as a standalone business unit within its portfolio and maintain the Footlocker brands, according to the statement. Footlocker operates across 20 countries and markets, including North America, Europe, and Asia, and logged worldwide sales of $8 billion in 2024, which is quite pretty penny to say the least. They say last week Skechers also sold for $9.42 billion to private equity company 3G, exiting public markets after 26 years. The popular shoe brand grapples with the impact of steep U.S. tariffs. They say that Dick's intends to finance the deal, which expects to close second half of 2025 through a combination of cash on hand and new debt. Which, yeah, Dick's Sporting Goods, I mean, the joke is no one shops at Dick's because they're Dick's. Famously after, what was it? Was it the Sandy Hook Massacre? Dick's Sporting Goods CEO publicly, bombastically bragged about destroying $5 million in inventory of AR-15 pattern rifles. And the stock actually went up a little bit, as mentally vacuous as that sounds. The company also said, oh yeah, we're no longer going to have the standard most popular rifle in North America. We're going to take that out of the stores. We're going to get rid of that. We're also going to probably get rid of pistols. We'll just sell wooden shotguns, which are fun for trap shooting, but the least controversial thing. Although, funny enough, Dick's Sporting Goods also owns Stream and River, or whatever crappy store that's called. That one does have actual AR-15s, which is, again, is the most popular rifle type sold in the United States. And Dick's Sporting Goods sells barely any ammunition these days. So all the guys that are into guns, so all the guys in the United States, you really don't shop at Dick's. And truth be told, they're wasting money, I think, having any presence at all in Texas, because a sporting goods store that is 100 million times better than Dick's Sporting Goods is Shields, which, I mean, Dick's Sporting Goods is, very liberal, based in the Northeast, I believe Pennsylvania specifically. Shields is employee-owned, headquartered in the great, moderately known state of North Dakota, and they have everything from dumbbells, bench press, to treadmills, out fishing gear, AR-15, even suppressors, and some NFA items, or items that fall under the NFA Act, or the National Firearms Act of 1934. So personally, I've not been to a Dick's Sporting Goods, I believe, since middle school, partially because of the politics and also their poor customer service, and I would say lack of, actual lack of variety of stuff inside the store. And it'll be interesting to see if long-term this helps the companies out. I think it makes sense to keep the brands separate. I don't know. I mean, the Footlocker has done so bad, investing so much money in those standalone stores at malls, which, again, for decades were highly profitable. It's a great business idea. It worked awesome. But again, people do not go to the malls as much as they used to. And that's predominantly where they are. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a good long-term relationship. It does make sense to have the increased buying power. They now have a huge amount of negotiation with these large companies like Nike, Puma, and Adidas. Just like you and I, when we go to Costco, we get a better cost per unit when we buy in bulk. Same thing happens with businesses. Sorry. I keep having the joke. When we first started the show, barely anyone subscribed or tuned in. Well, maybe family. And I spoke faster than Ben Shapiro and more awkwardly than Joe Biden trying to climb upstairs. But as I slowly but surely gain more subscribers, I've been slightly better at speaking. Some might argue it's just a modicum of improvement, barely anything at all, though technically, statistically speaking, I do think an improvement. So you can go ahead and click that button. I think it'll actually help my speaking skills, so I'll make it through an entire episode someday, speaking perfectly, articulation, and timing. Time shall tell, but if you can click that button again, I'd greatly appreciate it. And let me know in the comments, because as always, I'd be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Other interesting business news, you have Cadillac saying they will not do another Corvette-based vehicle. Somewhat, I think, unfortunately. Now, this is brought to us thanks to MotorOne.com. Oh, apologies there. And they say, quote, bad news, a Corvette-based Cadillac won't happen. Such a car would share too many components of the Corvette, says GM President Mark Roos. And here you can see, I still think one of the most beautiful looking Cadillacs in the past 100 years. This is a Cadillac XLR. It's a coupe, had a Corvette drivetrain. Now, the disappointing part was it was only available in an automatic transmission, which is obviously boring as hell, and I would never actually buy it. Though again, aesthetically speaking, it looked like a really cool car, and while people mostly made fun of it for looking like a Corvette, or having the drivetrain of a Corvette with the Cadillac badging, I mean, in this case, the body style was completely different than the Corvette. I mean, people used to make fun of GM because in the 80s, it was the same crappy cars, and they just put different badges on, like the same fenders, the same hood, the same angles. I mean, in this case, I actually thought this was kind of a good business idea because, again, get the same great powertrain as a V8, and you got some cool styling in Cadillac, and I still smile when I see these on the road to this day. Even though it's an automatic born transmission, they still look really unique. I see them about maybe once or twice a year, and again, there's such a neat angular coupe from Cadillac. It's a little disappointed they don't make more of them. Or any coupes these days, for that matter. Now, this is brought to us thanks to Anthony Alays, again, over at MotorOne.com. And he says, quote, Cadillac isn't the same brand as it was 20 years ago. Its post-recession revival focused on ensuring its models were truly distinct from the other products in the GM portfolio. That wasn't exactly the mentality of the company in the early 2000s when it developed the XLR as a secondary vehicle with the C6 Corvette. GM President Mark Roos revealed the company wouldn't do the same thing today. He told CNBC that such a car would not fit the brand's current strategy. He said it would likely share too many components with a Chevy, failing to stand out as a unique performance product. Honestly, that makes sense. Although, being a gearhead, I would argue that in terms of a performance product, Cadillac is way better than Chevrolet these days because Cadillac listens to the consumers and gives them the option of having a third pedal, also known as manual transmission. And the CT4V Blackwing and the CT5V Blackwing with a V6 and V8 respectively are marvels of engineering and great track toys. They're awesome. I got to drive the CT4V Blackwing once. It was exhilarating. One of the best things GM makes. Granted, the bar is quite low. But then you have the Corvette, which is automatic only, and the gearheads like me, utterly disappointing. As every Corvette since 1950, well, it started in 53, was a straight 6 engine. Ugh. But every Corvette, I believe 1956, they upgraded the V8. They all had the option for 6 shift. But yeah, GM said, oh yeah, we're going to throw all that away. Now, they say, quote, The C8 Corvette provides several powertrain choices across the range of price points. The entry-level Stingray makes 490 horsepower and costs $70,000, while the Corvette ZR1 produces 1,064 horsepower with a $178,195 starting price. Then there's this Corvette E-Ray, the dumbest thing of all, a hybrid with all-wheel drive and 655 horsepower for $108,000. They note that doesn't leave Cadillac a ton of room for a similar product. Instead, Rose told the publication that Cadillac sees growth opportunities in specialty vehicles. This is hilarious. It also shows how dumb GM is. They say the $340,000 Celic previews that future, which the company says will be as rare as a Bugatti. But unlike in a Bugatti, no one will give a crap about the Cadillac Celask in more than 18 months. That's the Cadillac that costs over $340,000 is an EV coupe that's the size of a Rolls Royce. Yeah, no one is going to remember that car. Now, ironically, in terms of collectibles, usually when something is a commercial failure, it does become a collectible later because there's so few of them around. There's a mystique or mysterious thing around them. You see this with like prototype firearms. But in terms of an EV Cadillac, two-door, that again is pretending to be a luxury vehicle. To me, it's just so dumb. And I don't even think they're going to sell out all 25 that they claim. And Bugatti, and they list to consumers, that's got a nice V16 engine. It howls like in a symphony. It's beautiful. That'll be collectible for quite some time. Though again, I'm not a fan that's a hybrid. Good luck maintaining that thing long term. But yeah, we'll see. I still think it wouldn't be a terrible idea to borrow just the engine alone to put in a Cadillac. Again, the people really don't like the fact that the bodies in the 80s were all disgustingly similar. The 90s too. That's where literally they just changed out the badges on the front, where it was just so insulting to the consumer. I mean, in this case, they actually, and again, I know the drivetrain, to me, this was distinct enough. And I usually make fun of car companies for, doing badge sharing and, having too many components go from vehicle to vehicle. I mean, if you could have a Cadillac with a Corvette drivetrain and maybe give it that stick shift, which again, you see the people who like stick shifts are usually, interestingly enough, more of the youth and then more of the elderly, kind of the two demographics that have the highest participation in the stick shifts these days. But again, I think that'd be pretty cool. But let me know your thoughts, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Now, going over to the Cultural Pride podcast, you have Matt Walsh on South African refugees going viral on X. Now, the statement got 3.7 million views and 133,000 likes, which is quite a few to say the least. Now, Matt Walsh says, quote, "Folks, remember, the white South Africans don't belong in South Africa even after 400 years. White Americans are invaders in America even after 500 years. But the third world illegal migrant who got there last Tuesday is just as American as anyone else. If you call him an invader, you're racist," unquote. Again, that got 3.7 million views, 134,000 likes, which is quite a few to say the least, as some people are critiquing, how dare Trump have these people whose lives are legitimately in danger flee South Africa with a lot of people are suspecting the upcoming genocide to come to the United States or to actually be refugees. Because again, the African leaders are literally chanting for death to them. And one of the leaders in an interview was so blazing to say, he's like, "I'm not calling on their deaths, but I can't make any guarantees. Can't guarantee tomorrow." Something to that effect, which is just ridiculous. Now, one of the first comments comes to us thanks to Ian Miles Chong, and he says, quote, "They just hate white people," quote, getting 222 likes. Barefoot Pregnant says, "Everyone deserves respect, but the roots of America can't be erased for political convenience," getting 27 likes. 28. Paul Zupa says, "Not just as Americans, more Americans, illegals get benefits that not even citizens do." Getting 48, 7 likes. Yeah, they get new cell phones. I mean, shoot, I got a Samsung S10, knock on wood, it'll last a little while longer as I go through the ever debate. Do I stay Samsung or go to the dark side? Go get Apple. Though, to Apple's credit, their medium phone does have a terabyte capacity. Samsung doesn't offer that until you get the large phone, which I know they have all fancy names, but I just call the phone small, medium, large because every phone company makes a small, medium, large model. But I partially digress. They get free phones. California gave them over $2 billion in health care for illegals. New York gave them, $7 per night hotel vouchers. It seems like you get more benefits by breaking into the country than actually paying taxes, which is kind of disappointing. You also have Based Electrician saying, quote, "Leftists, it's getting a little too white around these parts. What do you say, Maryland man?" Getting 26 likes. I have Anti-Woke Memes says, quote, "Woke ideology is evil." There's a picture of a kid with a poster. And it says, "Black is something." It says, "Watching my 5-year-old wrestle with his whiteness." What does it say? It's upside down. and poorly written. They got 238 likes. Did someone respond to what it's actually saying? Nah, not seeing it. Dr. Sherry says, just good old-fashioned apartheid millionaires who got ran out of the country because they cannot oppress Africans anymore. 145 likes in a contrarian statement. Now, one of the first comments to her, almost ratioed her, but not quite, comes from TTL Inc. Said, every single leftist woman should be deported to Libya. They need a dose of reality, getting 130 likes. It is fascinating when you look at the rates of who has the most mental illness. It's usually college-educated liberal white women. Scrolling down, you have Deox Mozzarella says the group that built the country gained 49 likes. Gregory Ross says that ended in the 90s, who moron gained 40 likes. Danny D says typical childish liberal white women. They're all the same, full of hate. Gained 41 likes. You forgot full of hate and cats. I don't want to say 99% of cats are bought by them, but probably 95%, give or take. Zine Fu says just another white female libtard. Gained 40 likes. Crazy Vibes also brings up some statistics, though. Again, I've looked around. I can't see the source. I have not seen the source for this. Crazy Vibes says soon they will find out. And this is a little meme or a little picture. It says, quote, South Africa F around and find out. White farmers currently produce 95.3% of their corn, 98.7% of their wheat, 97.6% of their cotton, 97.2% of their citrus, 99% of their potatoes, 91.4% of their tomatoes, 96.9% of their soybeans, 95.8% of their poultry, 66% of their cattle, and 89% of their wool. And that got 812 likes. Yeah, Mirthful Moments says any type of racism is unacceptable. And he has a picture that says, believe it or not, hating white people is racism too, getting 745 likes. Going down, you have McKinley said, white South Africans have shown more patriotism than the non-white who have lived in America for years. And you can see the folks that just arrived here, they're carrying American flags. The same people have been here for over years, and you see a bunch of people holding, flags of Mexico, which is a third world hellhole that, eliminates their political opponents. What's a nice way of saying this? Assassinations, with the cartel basically running the country. There's a reason my family came from Cuba. You'll never see us holding a Cuban flag. It's a third world hellhole because of the communism. Yeah, no real Cuban holds a Cuban flag. When they come here, we have American flags because America's awesome. That's why we came here, legally. And believe it or not, family actually flew here. One of the last flights out when Fidel took over, but another topic for another time, perhaps. That again got 1,000 likes. Ambassador Charlie says, quote, if white Southern Africans don't belong in South Africa, even though they've lived there for 400 years, then why do blacks belong in America? Gained 508 likes. Oz Demar says, Boers have been in many parts of South Africa longer than the Bantus have been there. Whites arrived in America before Maori, before in New Zealand. The left is completely, utterly hypocritical when it comes to the ideas of nativeness, indigenous, and belonging. Getting 6.5 thousand likes. Let's see. Mr. Pitbull, though I do not suspect is the artist or the singer Pitbull, unless he has a disproportionate amount of free time in his hands to tweet these days. Now, he says, quote, in South Africa, 70% of murdered farmers are white. The white makes just 7% of the population. The targeted slaughter is not random violence, but deliberate racial genocide. The mainstream media's shameful silence on this atrocity exposes their bias and betrays justice. Getting 1.7 thousand likes. It looks like a bunch of white folks in black t-shirts and jeans. I think of. Actually, no, I did. I guess in my life, I did own one pair of black jeans. So weird, though. And they have a sign that says, stop killing farmers, getting 1.7 thousand likes. And they say Black Monday in the killing fields. They also have Jim from The Office with the whiteboard, mame looking. And this is posted to us thanks to anti-left memes, says, Dear Leftists. It says Jim saying, I refuse to be lectured about racism by someone who hates white people, getting 977 likes. Brotherhood says, quote, white Europeans apparently don't belong in Europe either. They're flooded with invaders too. They simply hate white people, but want our wealth, getting 3.2 thousand likes. Earthful Moments. Matt Walsh, the great replacement theory is real. If you have any doubt, the story about the South African refugees should clear it up for you. The left wants unchecked third world migration because they want to make America less white. That's it. That's simple. That's why they oppose white refugees, because white refugees defeat the whole purpose of program. Getting 946 likes. And yeah, I'll never forget when Joe Biden said it's a good thing that you don't see white folks in commercials anymore. Well, he has a lot of things that I'll never forget. That's one of them. Let's see. Scrolling down more and more. Ooh, contrarian statement, mentally vacuous. Well, though maybe that's why he has the most replies to his statement. Faye simply says, wait a minute, it's gotta be her. Yeah, Faye, F-E-Y. That was a character in Cowboy Bebop, too. Good old show. Now, she says, quote, this tweet smells like powdered wigs and stolen land. And Vox X Nilio says, what land in recorded history wasn't stolen? Getting 140 likes. Yep. Ratio, as you might say. Worldwide Hook says the chick spreading her legs for attention and advertising her OnlyFans. You should hate everyone in the entire world, as every race slowly has conquered land. Getting 106 likes. Chad of all Chad says, why are white women so self-loathing? Good question. Getting 185 likes. Maybe it's Cosmo. Mark Johnson says the hypocrisy is astounding. You have a typical leftist who's overweight with short pink hair, white woman, obviously, and says, refugees welcome. Then they see the white Africans and she's angry, getting 317 likes. So again, hopefully there's no one major hurt in South Africa. Hopefully nothing bad does happen, but it seems to be that the politics are boiling, so to say. But let me know in the comments your thoughts, guys. As always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Now, going over to the political part podcast, you have Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett grilling a Trump administration. This brought to us thanks to America Pop Bear. And shoot, this is probably retweeted and tweeted by 100 plus people. But he had the most interesting profile picture, and I follow him, so give him a shout out. America Pop Bear says, quote, breaking news, Justice Amy Coney Barrett grills the Trump administration after they slammed rogue activist judges' national injunctions. Who else thinks Amy Coney Barrett is compromised? Without too much further ado, this is credited to CNN, which is somehow still in business. I can't fathom how it's possible that they're financially viable, but they somehow still are.
Opinions and judgments here. Did I understand you correctly to tell Justice Kagan that the government wanted to reserve its right to maybe not follow a Second Circuit precedent, say, in New York, because you might disagree with the opinion?
Our general practice is to respect those precedents, but there are circumstances when it is not a categorical practice, and that is not
this administration's practice or the longstanding practice of the federal government. And I'm not talking about in the Fourth Circuit, are you going to respect a Second Circuit? I'm talking about within the Second Circuit. And can you say, is that this administration's practice or a longstanding one?
As I understand it, longstanding policy of the Department of Justice, yes, that we generally, as it was phrased to me, generally respect circuit precedent, but not necessarily in every case. And some examples might be a situation where we're litigating to try and get that circuit precedent overruled and so forth.
I'm sorry, the title is Justice Kagan asked Trump administration if the position could mean that every person affected by executive order would have to sue.
Well, okay, so I'm not talking about a situation in which, the Second Circuit has a case from 1955 and you think it's time for it to be challenged. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in this kind of situation. I'm talking about this week, the Second Circuit holds that the executive order is unconstitutional, and then what do you do the next day or the next week?
Generally, we follow those.
So you're still saying generally?
Yes.
And you still think that it's generally the policy, longstanding policy of the federal government to take that approach?
That is my understanding.
Okay, so, but it sounds to me like you accept a Cooper versus Aaron kind of situation for the Supreme Court, but not for, say, the Second Circuit. Like where you would respect the opinions and the judgments of the Supreme Court, and you're saying you would respect the judgment, but not necessarily the opinion of a lower court.
And again, I think in the vast majority of instances, our practice has been to respect the opinion as well, in the circuits as well, but my understanding is that has not been a categorical practice in the way respect for the precedents and the judgments of the Supreme Court has been.
So you're not hedging at all with respect to the precedent of this court?
That is correct. I believe the quotation from our application directly addresses that, and we stand by that completely.
Okay.
Why does she sound like a Starbucks barista? Now, again, this was pretty viral. Well, not this individual post, but it's posted hundreds of times. Got about 50,000 likes, as well as 2.2 thousand likes, 46.6 thousand views, and 2.2 thousand likes. One of the first comments comes to us thanks to Elizabeth Tino saying, quote, I think she is. Her and Roberts have been compromised in some way. I don't recall any Scottish justice being in the news like this or voicing an opinion. It's always known them to be 100% quiet or neutral. If anything is constitutional crisis, I think this is. Gained 41 likes, and Pop Bear says, quote, they 100% have something on her, gained 21 likes. Yep. FAFO, the first says she needs to be investigated, gained 23 likes. Finance Reb says, yes, she's a terrible choice, gained 5 likes, 6 likes now. Melissa Altman says, Barrett seems to be a deep state plant. Maybe. Frank says, yeah, something seems off with her recently. Yeah. Linda Matthews says, compromise, bought, or phony to begin with. I'm not sure what she is. She is definitely not an impartial judge who only interprets the law. Game 4 is making 5 likes. And again, interesting thing with Republicans or rhinos, I swear, no one's more disappointing. They say that I'm so irate they haven't repealed the NFA Act of 1934 that forces us to pay a $200 extortion tax if you want to buy some of our constitutional rights like short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotguns, destructive devices, or machine guns. On top of the sales tax, it's also ridiculous. But yeah, let's just say the rhinos is disappointing left and right. Some Republicans are rhinos. But yeah, she seemed, I mean, look at her, her track record, everything seemed right. And after they overturned Roe v. Wade and the violence from the leftists, I think she's either compromised or she's scared for her own life and being a coward. And she's just doing whatever the leftists want because she knows people on the right don't riot or do anything. But people on the left will actually show up to the justices' houses, and they have, to threaten them and cause vandalization and damage. Claudia also says she's not compromised. She's just a neutral piece of shit and always has been. I don't think she's neutral, but that got 8 likes. Eddie says at this point, everyone knows it, getting 4 likes. Sean McCannon says she's scared from her confirmation the left did terrorize her family, getting 6 likes. Ironically, the party of peace and tolerance is always the one that has causing all the ruckus, all the violence. We also have Steve Monas saying, quote, looks like Justice Barrett's robe is a little too tight around the bias. Maybe she needs to be a reminder that the Constitution is a suggestion box for the left. Time to search some real justice, getting 6 likes. Sorry, I meant to say the Constitution is not a suggestion box for the left. We also have Michael Tex says, I'm not sexist, but here's the thing, which is kind of funny when people have this prefaces. One of my favorite is an old mentor of mine used to say, everything before the but is bullshit. And it's like, I'm not a fan of the Bears, but they're awesome. Granted, no one would ever say that because the Bears suck. But nonetheless, Michael Texas says, quote, I'm not sexist, but here's the thing. Never put a woman in a position of authority when it comes to politics or courts. Women have great tendencies to make decisions based on their emotions, which, yeah, that's also kind of true in terms of the emotion. Men and women both have their strengths and weaknesses. Implicit truth says, quote, they're trying to lose legitimacy and unrightly usurper almost 100 years ago. Good. SCOTUS is never supposed to be issuing on rulings, only opinions. As we all know, opinions can be ignored, getting 6 likes as well. So a couple contrarian or interesting comments. And again, one of the most disappointing Supreme Court justices, I would argue, for decades. Granted, it's pretty low. Well, I'd say it's a pretty low bar with a lot of the lame appointees. But let me know your thoughts, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Other interesting political news, Representative Shri Thanedar wants people to stop mocking him online. This is brought to us thanks to End Wokeness on X. And it's about 35 seconds long, but let's hear what he has to say.
But they talk about my hair. They talk about my hair. They talk about my appearance. They talk about where I was born. They talk about everything, my looks. They talk.
I mean, seriously, doesn't look that bad. I don't know if people are actually making fun of him for that or he just feels self-conscious. I mean, yeah. It's not like it's bad hair.
Talk about my age. They talk about why I should be deported back to the country where I was born.
That sounds awkward as shit. He doesn't want to mention that country. Back to the country now that sounds like a robot. Back to the country I am born. Or is it just a lazy student in college trying to lengthen their essay or their speech and inserting extra words? That just sounds clumsy as hell.
To the country where I was born. They talk about my past business dealings and they distort my business record. They do everything.
Yeah, at least he did suit up, so he did one thing right in his life. And that got 3.4 million views and 31,000 likes. And if you close your eyes, he does kind of sound like a South Park character. Now, the gas stove, which I was going to say, I always follow him because usually pretty interesting comments, usually contrarian. He says, quote, holy shit, Shri Thanedar is the most dangerous Democrat in the Senate right now. If he succeeds in impeaching, I think he is the best shot for AOC's vice president VP. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Getting 56 likes and 135 comments. One of the first comments is from Woke Zombie saying, are you retarded? Getting 66 likes. Total Nemesis says he's not eligible, getting 25 likes. Snowden Matthews Jr. says, that's your dream ticket, idiot. Run, getting 28 likes. Now you also have Paul Zupa says, quote, I noticed Thanedar didn't mention the $800,000 he owes, getting 975 likes. Dildor Baggins, perhaps the cousin of Bilbo Baggins, says, quote, Grok, can you make me a picture of him in an India scam call center? And Grok made, a funny picture of him in the scam center, getting 633 likes. AB says, quote, if you close your eyes, he sounds like a South Park character, getting 9.7 thousand likes in community notes. True. Now, Mr. Pitbull says impeach Shri Thanedar. And this is an article that says, quote, in 2010, Shri Thanedar, a Michigan Democrat politician and businessman, owned a pharmaceutical testing lab, Ani Clinic Preclinical Services in Oxford, New Jersey, under the parent company Azopharma. When Azopharma went bankrupt in April 2010, the lab was shuttered and approximately 118 beagles and 55 masking monkeys were left at the facility. Reports indicate that the former lab workers climbed fences to provide food and water for the animals as they were initially left without proper care. Animal welfare groups, including Pets Alive in New York and Defense of Animals in California, stepped in to rescue the animals. By July 4, 2010, the beagles were placed in shelters for adoption, and monkeys were later relocated to sanctuaries across the U.S. Getting 1.3 thousand likes, and talk about lack of any intelligence when closing down a facility. Forgot about the puppies? Really? That's ridiculous. Yeah, John Tucker must die. It's a picture of Grok with AI, picture of Shari in a plane. It says animal abuser piece of shit, getting 663 likes. I Love American News says no. Here's a picture of him in makeup and long hair, getting 614 likes. Let's see. More articles of him with the beagles, getting 650 likes. Sarah Smith says, maybe if you stop acting like a clown, we'll stop treating you like one. There's him with clown makeup, getting 702 likes. Vault has another picture of him as clown, getting 282 likes. First Punch Skull says, not possible when he looks like this. And it's the age-old classic clip of Dave Chappelle Show as he's the white reporter, getting 980 likes. You see Carla Shahir Samoyed Mom says, quote, how was he elected for that after the animal abuse, among other things, getting 1.2 thousand likes? I mean, he's a Democrat in Michigan. How could he not get elected? They're, on average, a pretty blue state, historically speaking. And again, a lot of people just say vote blue no matter who. And again, there's a lot of people also on the right who just, is it R next to that guy's name? We'll vote for him. I think there's a high propensity that happens with Democrats. That's why they have the whole chant and mantra of vote blue no matter who. But yeah, I'm not surprised you got elected. Scrolling down more and more. Someone has an AI video of his hair being turned into a squirrel, getting 667 likes. That was credited to George Bella. Let's see. Also have Masculine Base says, if mockery hurts, maybe politics isn't for you, Cupcake, getting 620 likes. Oh, this is the best one. Act 238 says, okay. It's, what is it? Not Scaramanga, but the midget from James Bond, I believe is Dr. No. And he looks suspiciously like the politician getting 145 likes. So close. A lot of people comparing him to Jimmy Kimmel. Granted, they're probably both equally insufferable in terms of mentality. They don't look that similar. But yeah, it's probably a politician crying about being made fun of. I mean, inherently, you're going to be made fun of if you're in politics. I mean, that's just, I don't want to say half the job, but have a big side effect of it. So again, the smart thing would be to do like JD Vance and just lean into the meme. Actually, it doesn't bother you. Just kind of roll with it, and actually, I kind of think works in your favor. And a lot of people appreciate self-deprecating humor. A lot of people find it funny, and it shows you're not a sociopath. I would argue, but yeah, telling people this annoys you just guarantees the internet is going to fuel more of it. But let me know your thoughts, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Now, going over to the business blunder of the day, you have Polaris recalling more of their recreation off-road vehicles that cost quite a pretty penny. That's brought to us thanks to the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is perhaps the only useful government website. Granted, that bar is pretty low, in which they say, quote, Polaris Industries recalls Ranger XP1000 North Star and Ranger XP1000 North Star Crew recreation off-road vehicle due to a injury hazard. And at least they look pretty cool. Although granted, for that price point, they darn better look like something out of Halo or something. Now, they say, whoopsies, there's a hazard. Now, they say this recall involves certain VIN models of Polaris, model year 2023 to 2025. The recall vehicles are sold in black, blue, brown, camouflage, gray, orange, red, tan, and white. They're sold in a 3 and 6 seat configuration, have Polaris stamped on the front grille. The VIN is printed on the left rear frame on the driver's side under the cargo box. Now, the hazard is, I'm not sure who's in charge of making these, perhaps they're inebriated. They say, quote, the lower seat belt anchor fasteners were not properly tightened, which can result in the seat belt separating from the vehicle frame, failing to protect riders. And they clarify, thanks government, without that protection, riders can be ejected from the vehicle to crash, posing perhaps an injury hazard. no duh, but again, it's government speak. It's got to be bland, boring, and overly comical. Now, this affected about 640 units, in addition to about 24 that were sold in Canada. And looks like they have a repair remedy for this, thankfully. Now, they say consumers should immediately stop using the recalled vehicles and schedule an appointment with a Polaris dealer to schedule a free inspection and repair at the dealer's location. They advise that consumers may continue to operate the vehicles prior to the repair only if the conduct of the inspection is followed by seatbelt fastener verification instructions located on the firm's website. To continue operating the recalled ROVS prior to getting recalled, fasteners must be secure where the belt is anchored to the vehicle frame. Polaris has contacted registered vehicle owners directly. Now, thankfully, no one's been injured from this. So no one's passed away. There hasn't been too many injuries. Now, they did note that the firm identified 2 vehicles with loose seatbelt fasteners, but again, no injuries or deaths were reported. So it's good they got ahead of the situation. Now, personally, I'd be pretty irate. I'm kind of a frugal guy in general. And I say I'd be irate because these are a pretty penny. These are sold at dealers nationwide from April 2022 to March 2025 for between $28,000 and $38,000 for these vehicles. Which, again, that's actually more expensive than, I was going to say more expensive than my car. My car is used. It's more expensive than a new Honda Civic SI or a used Honda Civic Type R. Again, getting $38,000, great bang for your buck. But you're spending more than the price of a car, and they didn't attach the one safety thing in this thingamajig. Now, granted, I know a lot of these are probably driven slow on farms. Not all of them are used for off-roading and, going mudding, so to say. And it's nice that, it's made in the USA. Well, debatably, it's made in Minnesota, but yeah, I gotta say, having a vehicle that costs between $28,000 and $38,000 and having something like a loose fastener that's also related to safety, gotta say, Polaris, you are certainly the business blunder of the day. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Again, trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you click that button, I greatly appreciate it. Also, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a comment. It's a great way to give me some additional feedback, letting me know how I can make the show better and better. Lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.